welcome to our deep dive into the Sangam Age.
Yeah,
It's an amazing era in ancient South India.
definitely.
Whether you are getting ready for the UPSC exam or just curious about this time period, get ready to learn some interesting things. We're going to be exploring everything from like social structures to recent discoveries from archaeology that are changing how we understand this era.
It's really incredible. What we find in the Sangam Age is that it's not just some chapter in a history textbook.
Right.
It comes alive through the literature,
Yeah.
the art, and even engineering that you can still see today.
Okay, well, let's start with the basics. What exactly is the Sangam Age?
Yeah.
And why is it so important for understanding ancient South India?
Well, since Sangam Age lasted roughly from the 3rd century BCE to the 3rd century CE.
Okay.
And it really represents this incredible flourishing of literature in South India, particularly in the Tamil language. Imagine all these gatherings of poets and scholars known as Sangams. They would get together under the patronage of kings to compose and share and discuss their works. These gatherings were mainly associated with the Pandya kings, and they became like the center of intellectual and cultural life.
So these Sangams were like the literary salons of their time.
Exactly.
Shaping the intellectual landscape and creating so much literature for us to discover and explore today.
Yeah, and it's through this literature that we get a glimpse into this world of love, war, ethics, and just everyday life. It's like having a direct line to the thoughts and emotions of people who lived over 2,000 years ago. Now, tradition says there were 3 Sangams.
Okay.
The first one is shrouded in legend, and we don't have any records that survived from it.
Oh, wow.
The second one was held in Kapadapuram, and we only have one text left from it called the Tolkappiyam.
Okay.
And the third Sangam was in Madurai, and that's where most of what we call Sangam literature comes from.
If you're getting ready for the UPSC,
yes,
this is super important to remember.
It is.
Okay, now you mentioned the Tolkappiyam. What makes it so important?
Well, it's thought to be the oldest surviving Tamil grammar text.
Okay.
But it's not just some boring rule book about language.
Yeah.
It actually gives us really valuable insights into the social structure and the customs and even the economy of that time.
It's like a cultural encyclopedia disguised as a grammar text.
Yeah.
For people studying for the UPSC, this means that Tolkappiyam isn't just about language, but also about broader history.
Definitely.
Okay, well, before we get too far into the details, you mentioned Aham and Puram in Sangam poetry. What's that all about?
So Aham and Puram are like 2 different ways Sangam poets looked at the world. Aham is all about the internal world.
Yeah?
The world of emotions, focusing on love and longing, and it often takes a female perspective.
Interesting.
Puram, on the other hand, looks at the external world, heroism, war, and kingship, and that's usually from a male perspective.
So it's like 2 sides of the same coin.
Right.
The personal and the public, the emotional and the epic.
Exactly.
Could you give us some examples of poems from each category, to really show this contrast?
Sure. In Aham poetry, you have poems like those found in the Ankurunuru anthology. They describe the stages of love in so much detail. Imagine a poem that describes the nervousness of a woman waiting for her lover to come back.
Oh, wow.
Or the bittersweet happiness of a secret look. Then you have Puram poetry, like the poems in the Purananuru anthology. Those poems are about bravery in battle, the glory of kings, and keeping your word. And they're full of images of battlefields, heroic actions, and the values of a warrior society.
It's fascinating. You can really see how these poems show us not just the emotions, but also the values of that time.
Yeah.
And let's talk about some specific works of early Sangam literature.
Okay.
One that's always seemed mysterious to me is the Agatyam.
Ah, yes, the Agatyam. It's supposed to be the very first grammar book of the Tamil language written by the sage Agatyar.
Okay.
Unfortunately, no copies have survived. But its impact is huge. It's like a foundational myth for Tamil literature.
So like a literary Atlantis. A lost world of knowledge we can only dream about.
Yeah, but luckily...
We do have the Tolkappiyam, which, like we said, is the oldest surviving grammar text.
Okay, cool.
The Tolkappiyam is split into 3 books, and it describes the rules of Tamil grammar and poetry.
Yeah.
But for historians, it's more than just about language.
Right.
It shows us the social hierarchies, the economic activity, and even the political structures of the early Sangam period.
Definitely a must-read for anyone who wants to understand this era.
Yes.
Especially if you're prepping for the UPSC.
Absolutely.
Now, beyond the Tolkappiyam, we have all these anthologies and epics.
Yes.
One that's really interesting is the Etuthagai, a collection of 8 anthologies.
That's right.
Each anthology has its own unique style and poems.
Yes.
And they give us a broad look at Sangam society. 8 anthologies. That's a lot to go through. What are some of the main things our listeners should know about?
Well, there are anthologies like Natrinai and Anguru Nuru, which explore love and relationships.
Okay.
Then there's Krinathogai,
which focuses on love before marriage and has connections to modern Tamil cinema. What's really interesting about Krinathogai is that its themes of longing, separation, and secret meetings still resonate with modern filmmakers. Even now, directors get inspiration from these ancient poems to show the complexities of love today.
So it's not just ancient history.
No.
It's a living tradition still influencing art and storytelling.
Exactly.
That's really amazing. What else do we have in these 8 anthologies?
Another important one is Anguru Nuru. We believe it's a Chera text, which means it gives us a look into the literary traditions of a specific kingdom. It's important to remember that the Sangam age wasn't one big uniform culture.
Yeah.
It was made up of contributions from different kingdoms and communities, each with its own unique style.
So it's about diversity within unity.
Yeah.
And besides the Tuthogai, we also have Patapatu, right?
Yes.
Another anthology, but this one is 10 long poems.
Right. Patapata means 10 idols. These poems are big and grand. They cover all sorts of topics, from guides for poets looking for patrons to thoughts about cities, landscapes, and even gods. Imagine reading Thurumurigatu Patai, a poetic guide to Lord Murugan, or Madura Kanchi, a poem that paints a picture of the old city of Madurai.
So these poems take us through the Sangam world.
Yes.
It's like we have the poets themselves as our tour guides.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
They really immerse us in the sights and sounds, even the smells of ancient South India. It's like going back in time and living life as the Sangam people did.
This has been an amazing exploration of early Sangam literature.
It has.
From that mysterious Agadiyam to those anthologies of Tuthugai and the epic Patapatu. But our journey through the Sangam age isn't over yet. We still have a lot of literature to cover with moral teachings and great epics.
Yes.
We'll get into those in the next part of our deep dive, so stay tuned.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the Sangam age.
It's great to be back.
In the last part, we looked at all that amazing early Sangam literature, those poems and anthologies. But there's more to the literature of that time than just love and heroism.
Right.
It also explored ideas about ethics and philosophy.
That's so true. And that's what makes the Sangam age so interesting. It wasn't just about beautiful poetry. It was about thinking about morality and justice and how to live a good life.
Exactly. And that's where the Patan and Kilkanaku comes in.
Yeah.
It's also called the 18 Minor Works.
Okay.
But don't let that name fool you.
Yeah.
These texts are from the later Sangam period. And they're definitely not minor in how they impacted things.
So early Sangam literature was about Ahim and Puram,
Right.
the personal and the public.
Yeah.
What do these later works tell us about?
The Patan and Kilkanaku is mostly about ethics and morals. It's like a guide for how to behave, what your responsibilities are in society, and even how to rule a country.
So a guidebook from 2,000 years ago that's still relevant now.
Exactly.
Wow. Can you give us an example of one of these works and what it teaches?
Of course. The most famous work from the Patan and Kilkanaku, and probably one of the greatest in Tamil literature, is the Thirukkural, written by Thiruvalluvar.
Okay.
This text is amazing. It's full of wisdom about tons of topics like love and family ethics, how to govern, and even economics.
I've heard so much about the Thirukkural. People studying for the UPSC always say it's a must-read for the history exam. What makes it so important historically?
The Thirukkural isn't just a bunch of wise sayings. It shows us the values and the way people thought in the Sangam age. It talks about ethical behavior, harmony in society, and leaders who are fair, which all shows us the kind of world they wanted, a world that was balanced and prosperous.
So it's more than just a historical text.
It is.
It's a source of wisdom that still speaks to us today, no matter where we come from or what time period we live in. Now, aside from moral teachings, the Sangam age is also known for its epic literature, full of heroes and gods and grand adventures.
You're right.
The 5 great epics of Tamil literature really show how good the Sangam poets were at telling stories.
Oh, wow. These stories blend mythology, history, philosophy, and romance all together to create this incredible picture of the Sangam world.
Okay, I'm ready for some epic storytelling.
Yeah. The most famous one is Silapathikaram. It's often called the Iliad of Tamil literature.
Wow.
It tells the tragic story of Kannagi, a woman who's trying to get justice for her husband who was wrongly accused of something.
Okay.
But this epic isn't just a great story.
Right.
It also comments on the social structures and the political maneuvering of the time.
It sounds like a story that would still resonate today.
Yes.
With themes of justice, loyalty, and the abuse of power. Is there a connection between Silapathikaram and any of the other epics?
There is.
Yeah.
Manamegalai is considered the sequel to Silapathikaram. It tells the story of Kanagi's daughter who decides to give up worldly things and becomes a Buddhist nun.
Oh, wow.
What's fascinating about Manamegalai is that it brings Buddhist philosophy into the Sangam world,
Right.
which shows us how intellectually diverse that era was.
So we have these two connected epics, exploring justice, fate, and searching for meaning.
Yes.
And both of them are still read and interpreted in new ways today.
What about the other three epics?
The other three, Jivaka Chintamani Valayapati and Kundalakesi, each add something unique to the rich tradition of epic literature in the Sangam age. Jivaka Chintamani, for example, follows the adventures of a prince, while Valayapati and Kundalakesi delve into themes of love and war and even Jain philosophy.
It's amazing that these epics from so long ago can still transport us to another world.
Yes.
They remind us that even in ancient times, people were dealing with the same things we do today, like love, loss, duty, and figuring out what life is all about.
That's right. These epics aren't just relics from the past. They continue to inspire artists, filmmakers, and even academics today.
We've covered so much about Sangam literature.
We have.
From love poems to morals and epic stories.
Yeah.
But literature wasn't the only thing that flourished during this time.
What about art architecture and what life was like socially and economically in the Sangam age?
You're right. The Sangam age was more than just words.
Yeah.
It was a time of innovation in art, grand architecture, and a complex social fabric that influenced the lives of its people.
So let's move beyond the literature and look at these other aspects of the Sangam age.
Yes.
What can we learn from the archaeological remains and historical accounts about the art and architecture from this time?
While we don't have as many physical remains from the Sangam period as we do from later eras, we can still piece together a fascinating picture by looking at both literary references and what archaeologists have found.
What kind of clues can we find in Sangam literature about the art and architecture?
Sangam poems often describe specific architectural features like the tall gateways of cities, the busy marketplaces, and even the palaces of kings decorated with detailed carvings and paintings.
Yeah.
For example, the poem Madurai gives us a really detailed description of the ancient city of Madurai, its streets, temples, and the vibrant life within it.
It's like a blueprint of a lost city in the form of poetry.
Yes.
What about actual physical remains? What structures have archaeologists found that show us the architectural style of the Sangam age?
One of the best examples are the remains of brick structures and fortifications at places like Arakamadu, an ancient port city on the east coast of India. These findings show a sophisticated understanding of urban planning and building techniques.
So these ancient cities weren't just random groups of buildings.
Yeah.
They were carefully planned urban centers that were both functional and beautiful.
Yes.
What about art? What kind of artistic expression was popular during this time?
Sangam literature mentions different types of art, including sculpture, painting, music, and dance.
Right.
While we don't have any paintings from that time, we do have some amazing bronze sculptures, like the ones found at Adikonalur in Tamil Nadu.
What do these bronze sculptures show?
They depict all sorts of things: deities, heroes, animals, and even everyday scenes. The detail and craftsmanship are incredible.
Yeah.
And they really highlight the skill of the Sangam artisans.
So these sculptures give us a real connection to the artistic sense of a lost time.
They do.
Now, besides the magnificent cities and the artistry of those sculptures, what can we learn about the lives of everyday people during the Sangam age? What was their social structure like, and how did they make a living?
Sangam literature gives us a lot of insight into the social hierarchy and economic activities of that time. Society was generally divided into 4 classes, or varnas: Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras.
Right. That's the fourfold division of society that we see all over ancient India.
Yes.
Was there anything unique about how this system worked during the Sangam age?
While the basic framework was similar, Sangam literature suggests that the social hierarchy was more fluid and less strict than we might think.
Interesting.
For example, we see people moving between classes based on their skills and what they achieved.
So social mobility wasn't completely impossible.
No, it wasn't.
What about the economy? What were the main ways people made a living in the Sangam age?
Agriculture was the foundation of the economy. with rice being the most important crop.
Okay.
Sangam poems give us vivid descriptions of the landscapes with their fertile fields, the rituals involved in farming, and even the different types of rice they grew.
So it's a society that was very connected to the land
Yes,
and the rhythms of nature.
exactly.
Were there any other economic activities besides farming?
Yes. Trade was also really important to the Sangam economy.
Okay.
The busy port cities like Puhar Musiri and Tondi, which are mentioned in Sangam poems, were centers of maritime trade connecting South India to the rest of the world.
I could just imagine those harbors full of ships carrying spices, silks, and all sorts of valuable goods coming from faraway places.
Yes.
What were some of the main things the Sangam people traded?
They exported a lot of different things, like spices such as pepper and cardamom, textiles, pearls, and ivory.
Wow.
And they imported horses from Arabia, gold and glassware from Rome, and ceramics from China.
So they were part of this massive network of trade routes
Yes.
that spanned the Indian Ocean.
That's right.
This maritime trade must have brought not just economic prosperity, but also cultural exchange and new ideas.
Absolutely. The Sangam Age was a time of a lot of cultural interaction with influences coming from all over. You can see this in their art literature and even their religious beliefs.
Speaking of religion, what were the dominant religions during the Sangam Age?
Sangam literature talks about a lot of different gods and religious practices.
Okay.
Worshipping Murugan, the warrior god, seems to have been really popular.
Right.
But we also see evidence of people worshipping Shiva Vishnu and other deities.
So it wasn't just one religion, but many different beliefs and practices existing together.
Exactly.
What about the role of women in Sangam society?
Yes.
We already know some poems give us a woman's perspective on love and longing.
Mm-hmm.
What about their roles in other parts of life?
Sangam literature portrays women as active members of society who had many different roles. We see women as poets, musicians, dancers, and even warriors.
Wow.
They were also involved in economic activities like weaving and trading.
It sounds like Sangam society, while not completely free from patriarchal ideas, allowed women a certain degree of freedom and expression.
Yes, and this is clear in the poems that are written from a woman's point of view, expressing their desires, frustrations, and hopes.
Yeah.
These voices challenge the idea that women in ancient Indian society had no power or voice.
This look into architecture, social structures, and the economy has really shown us what life was like in the Sangam Age.
Yes.
It wasn't just about literature. It was about a complex and dynamic civilization that left behind a legacy of amazing art, a vibrant culture, and deep intellectual thought.
Exactly. But the story of the Sangam Age doesn't stop there.
It doesn't.
Recent archaeological discoveries are making us rethink what we know about this era. They're pushing back timelines and showing us just how complex it really was.
That's what's so exciting about history. There's always something new to uncover something that changes our assumptions and makes us reevaluate what we thought we knew.
Yeah.
What are these new discoveries that are changing the history of the Sangam Age? So we've gone through all this amazing literature of the Sangam Age. We've explored the architecture,
Right.
and even delved into what their social and economic structures were like in this really fascinating era. But now, let's talk about the discoveries from archaeology that are changing everything we thought we knew about this period.
Okay.
I'm especially interested in the Kiladi excavations in Tamil Nadu.
Yes.
What makes these findings so important?
Kiladi is like this incredible time capsule that shows us just how sophisticated their cities were way earlier than we ever thought. The Kiladi excavations are telling us that there was a well-developed urban civilization in Tamil Nadu as far back as the 6th century BCE.
Wow.
Which pushes back the timeline for urban development in the region by at least 300 years.
That completely changes everything. It challenges the idea that big cities came much later to South India.
It does.
What evidence have archaeologists found to support this?
We've got all sorts of amazing evidence. Well-planned streets, drainage systems, brick structures, and all these artifacts that point to a really organized and skilled society. One of the most exciting things they found are pieces of pottery with writing on them.
Oh, wow.
Which shows they had a developed writing system in this early period.
So not only were they building these advanced cities, but they also had a writing system.
Yeah.
That totally changes how we see the level of intellectual and cultural development in the Sangam Age.
It really does.
What other artifacts did they find at Kiladi?
There's such a huge variety. It's amazing. We've got different types of pottery beads made from glass and special stones, tools for weaving and working with metal. even weapons. All this shows a society that was involved in all kinds of economic activities, from farming and crafts to trade and warfare.
So Kiladi wasn't just some small village. It was a bustling center of commerce and industry.
Yes.
Linked to a larger network of trade routes.
Exactly.
And all of this was happening centuries before we originally thought.
Right.
What does this tell us about how cities developed in ancient India?
Kiladi really challenges the old idea that cities in India were mainly started by the Indus Valley Civilization up north. These findings suggest that there were many different places where cities were popping up all over the subcontinent, each with its own unique characteristics and cultural influences.
That's a huge shift in how we look at ancient Indian history.
It is.
It moves away from thinking that everything important came from the north, and it highlights the exciting fact that there was so much development happening in different parts of the subcontinent, all with their own unique qualities.
Absolutely.
So what other things do the findings at Kiladi tell us about the Sangam Age?
Kiladi makes us realize that the Sangam Age wasn't just about great literature. It was also a time of important technological advancements, economic success, and cities growing and flourishing.
Makes you wonder what else is out there buried, just waiting to be discovered.
Definitely.
Kiladi is like this big reminder that history is always changing.
It is.
And that what we think we know about the past can always be updated with new information. Before we finish up, I want to go back to something we talked about earlier. Why the Sangam Age is still important to us today. Why should we, in the 21st century, care about a civilization that existed over 2,000 years ago?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
The Sangam Age, even though it was so long ago, has a lot to teach us. Things that are still important today. Its literature especially works. Like the Thirukural emphasizes ethical values, social responsibility, and fair governance. Things that are just as important now as they were back then.
You're so right. The teachings in the Thirukural about things like integrity, compassion, and the importance of education go beyond any specific time or culture.
They do.
They're like a guide for how to live a good life and build a fair and equal society.
Exactly. And beyond the ethics, the Sangam Age also gives us ideas about living sustainably. Think about their incredible irrigation systems, like the Kalani Dam, which still works even today. These amazing engineering feats show how deeply they understood managing water and taking care of their resources. Lessons that are really important now with climate change and all the problems we face with the environment.
It reminds us that ancient civilizations weren't just about big stories and battles. They were also about figuring out how to live day to day. Coming up with clever solutions. And trying to live in harmony with nature. So what else can we learn from the Sangam Age?
The Sangam Age also shows us that exchanging ideas and being connected with others is really important. Remember those busy port cities? Part of that huge network of trade routes. They weren't just places to buy and sell things. They were also where ideas, artistic styles, and religious beliefs were shared. The Sangam Age reminds us that closing ourselves off from the world doesn't usually lead to progress. Being open to new ideas, being willing to learn from other cultures, and working together across borders, these are all essential for growth and coming up with new things.
That's a message that's so important in our world today, where everything is connected.
It is.
The Sangam Age shows that cultural exchange isn't something new. It's been a part of human history from the beginning. And it's what drives creativity progress and the sharing of knowledge.
Exactly.
So whether you're studying for the UPSC and want to really understand ancient Indian history, or you're just someone who loves learning about the past, the Sangam Age is full of knowledge, wisdom, and inspiration. It reminds us that history isn't just a list of dates and events, but this vibrant tapestry that still influences who we are today and can inspire us to create a better future.
Well, we've covered so much in our deep dive into the Sangam Age. From those great works of literature to those amazing archaeological discoveries and the lessons it still has for us today. I hope our listeners have enjoyed going back in time with us.
Me too.
And that you have a new appreciation for this remarkable period in South Indian history. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep discovering all the amazing things our shared human history has to offer.